Russia used its captured Ukrainian base to launch a bold invasion on July 27, 2025. The Russian military initiated a powerful new offensive launch not from Russian soil, but from deep within Ukraine itself. The attack began from a military base Russia had seized years earlier. From there, 50 tanks, 30 armored personnel carriers, and 70 suicide drones surged forward in what could only be described as a modern blitzkrieg high tech, fast-moving, and meticulously coordinated to overwhelm Ukrainian defenses. But what the Russians didn't know was this: they were being watched closely, every movement tracked, every drone counted. As the Russian columns advanced, confident in their strategy, they rolled directly into a massive Ukrainian trapper. Minefield covering 3 square miles, expertly laid with more than 4,200 anti-tank mines, concealed beneath farmland, dirt roads, and tree lines. But even the most intricate plans are vulnerable to error. Ukraine's own forces nearly triggered disaster when a resupply truck veered dangerously close to the minefield. One more second, one more meter, and the chain of explosives could have been prematurely set off, ruining weeks of preparation. The only thing that stopped it? A last-second radio alert from a drone operator overhead. Would the trap still hold? Could Ukraine turn the tide against overwhelming firepower? Let's find out. The assault begins at exactly 6:40 a.m. Ukrainian. Satellites captured images that sent shockwaves through command centers. A massive Russian armored force was mobilizing, rolling out from captured Ukrainian territory in the Donetsk region, land Russia had held since early 2023. But this wasn't just a show of strength. This was a full-scale invasion. Leading the formation were 70 suicide drones, not used for reconnaissance, but for destruction. Each drone was equipped with high-explosive warheads capable of obliterating bunkers, vehicles, and personnel. Their purpose: to smash open corridors for the armor behind them. What made them particularly terrifying was their programming. If a drone detected jamming, radar interference, or unexpected resistance, it would immediately self-detonate. The loss of the drone was calculated into the assault. This wasn't just warfare, it was disposable, data-driven destruction. Following closely were 50 Russian T-90 tanks and 30 armored personnel carriers, carrying over 700 soldiers westward with precision. This was the largest integrated Russian mechanized assault since the early days of the 2022 invasion. Infantry, armor, drones, and strategy working as one. Western analysts were shocked. The estimated cost of the offensive? Over $350 million in vehicles, munitions, and drone technology, a staggering sum for a single push. But for the Kremlin, the goal was clear: break Ukraine's lines before fall. Ukraine's hidden weapon, but Ukraine had not been idle. Under the command of General Mykola Shevchenko, Ukraine's 93rd Mechanized Brigade had prepared something devastating beneath the soil. Weeks before the attack, they had transformed a seemingly unimportant stretch of farmland into a death zone, a meticulously engineered minefield stretching over 3 square miles. Over 4,200 anti-tank mines were laid in layered, staggered formations. They weren't just meant to destroy, they were meant to confuse. Narrow lanes were left clear deliberately to bait Russian armor into safe paths. But those paths were laced with pressure-activated smart mines that detonated beneath tank treads at exactly the right moment. And it worked. Just for minutes into the Russian advance, 17 tanks were torn apart. Turrets exploded skyward, shrapnel rained down, engines burned as the chaos spread across the battlefield. What made this trap so deadly wasn't just the hardware, it was the timing. Ukrainian UAVs circled above, feeding real-time intel to ground units. When the armored spearhead was perfectly in position, ground commanders activated remote triggers to maximize the devastation. But even brilliance has its vulnerabilities. That near miss with the Ukrainian supply truck? A brutal reminder that even friendly forces can fall victim to their own traps if coordination fails. The truck came to a halt just 6 feet from the minefield's edge. One more second and everything might have been lost. The counterattack as the dust and smoke rose from the obliterated Russian armor. Ukraine unleashed its second wave not from below, but from the horizon. At precisely 7:15 a.m., Ukraine's 12th Armored Assault Battalion launched a coordinated, three-pronged counteroffensive. Emerging from concealed positions west of the blast zone, 30 to T8 for Oblit tanks advanced alongside 10 self-propelled artillery units and mobile anti-aircraft systems. The ground trembled. Ukrainian forces had waited for this moment. The trap had worked. Now came the hammer. As Russian survivors attempted to regroup, they were met with a thunderous barrage. Precision artillery strikes pinned down remaining units, while tank crews pushed forward, cutting off escape routes and isolating pockets of Russian troops. Overhead, Ukraine's own drones neutralized remaining Russian UAVs before they could regroup or relay data. A new chapter in modern warfare. What happened on July 27th was more than just a tactical victory. It was a masterclass in 21st century warfare, a blend of old-school defensive strategy with modern technology and timing. The message to Moscow was clear: Ukraine would not be caught off guard, and any attempt at a surprise blitz could be met with devastating consequences. The battlefield was still smoking, bodies still unaccounted for, and armored wreckage littered the horizon, but one thing was undeniable. Ukraine had not only survived the Russian offensive, it had turned it into a symbol of resistance and precision warfare. Operation Frost Hook, the ambush that shattered a Russian offensive the moment, had been months in the making. Ukrainian forces, worn by relentless attrition but now armed with precise battlefield intelligence, were ready as the surviving Russian tanks scrambled to rotate turrets and retreat from the minefield they blindly charged into. Ukrainian armor surged forward at 45 miles per hour, guns primed and locked. In just the first 90 seconds, 9 more Russian tanks were annihilated by direct hits. Their crews never stood a chance. Then the sky erupted. Dozens of Russian suicide drones, those that hadn't already detonated in the failed advance stuff, toward the incoming Ukrainian armor in a last-ditch effort to turn the tide. But this time, Ukraine was prepared. Mounted on each armored column were Shvul-6 rotary cannons, multi-barrel anti-aircraft guns capable of unleashing 4,000 rounds per minute. Like saws of death, they shredded the skies. Drone after drone burst midair, some just 30 feet above tank turrets. The noise was overwhelming, a thunderstorm of screaming engines, gunfire, and exploding metal. In total, 47 out of the remaining 53 Russian drones were destroyed in under 4 minutes. The rest either veered off course or were neutralized by Ukrainian electronic warfare systems, which flooded the area with false GPS data and signal interference. Meanwhile, from a ridge 600 meters east, Ukrainian howitzers locked in. They targeted the flanks of the Russian retreat with surgical precision, obliterating supply vehicles and injuring several medics attempting to evacuate the wounded. A Ukrainian tank commander codenamed Vovik the Vol summed it up: "They walked into hell. We didn't chase them, we just lit the fuse." By 7:31 a.m., less than 20 minutes after Russia's spearhead entered the kill zone, the front had flipped. The invaders became the hunted, but Ukraine wasn't done. Among the burning wreckage, high-resolution drone footage revealed something critical: a Russian command vehicle transmitting encrypted orders. It was the nerve center of the entire assault. Its destruction or capture would mean total collapse. At 7:35 a.m., with the Russian advance in ruins, 850 elite Ukrainian infantry began to move. Hidden for hours in pre-dug trenches, abandoned farmhouses, and dense woodlands bordering the battlefield, these weren't ordinary soldiers. They were special fire teams, sharpshooters, anti-armor units, and electronic warfare specialists, all part of a larger strategy, Operation Frost Hook. Their orders were simple: exploit disarray. Strike hard, leave no room for recovery. As dismounted Russian infantry tried to regroup, Ukrainian fire teams opened up. RPG-29 launchers rained down on command trucks and APCs. One well-placed rocket ignited a Russian ammo truck, creating a fireball that soared 3 stories high and scattered flaming debris across a 100-yard radius. Snipers equipped with thermal optics picked off Russian NCOs attempting to rally their units. In under 6 minutes, more than 110 Russian troops were killed or incapacitated. The survivors fled, some into the woods, others dropping weapons and crawling for cover, but there was no escape. Unknown to them, Ukraine's 3rd Airborne Scouts had infiltrated behind the Russian spearhead hours earlier using underground drainage tunnels. When the retreating troops ran, they ran straight into a wall of gunfire, and then came the moment no one expected. Near the southern tree line, inside a half-collapsed comms vehicle, Ukrainian troops found a wounded man in full Russian field. Officer gear surrounded by maps, encrypted satellite comms, and a torn insignia patch. Something didn't add up. A biometric scan confirmed it. Colonel Viktor Sianovich, commander of Russia's 42nd Armored Regiment and a key architect of Moscow's southern campaign. He tried to flee disguised as a conscript, but a sharp-eyed Ukrainian sergeant noticed details no frontline soldier would carry: clean boots, an officer's GPS wrist unit. The colonel was quickly restrained, stabilized, and airlifted under heavy guard. The intelligence haul on him was staggering: encrypted drives, 72-hour combat plans, fallback position maps. According to Ukrainian intel officials, it was the most valuable capture since 2023. By 8:05 a.m., just 85 minutes after the Russian offensive began, it was over. What was meant to be a swift breakthrough had become a catastrophic rout operation. Frosthook didn't just halt the Russian advance, it was shattered. Vehicles lay in smoking ruins, over 200 soldiers were dead or captured, and their commanding officer was now in enemy hands. Ukraine hadn't just survived the onslaught, it had humiliated a larger, heavily mechanized force using a lethal blend of 20th century grit and 21st century precision. And the world was watching. By 8:10 a.m., what had begun as Russia's boldest offensive in 6 months became its most devastating single-day defeat since the early days of the war. The minefield that chewed up their tanks, the drones that fell from the sky, the ambush that scattered their infantry, it all culminated in a catastrophe that even Ukrainian generals hadn't fully anticipated. Satellite images confirmed the scale of destruction: 42 armored vehicles destroyed, 14 more disabled and abandoned. Over 230 Russian troops killed or taken prisoner, and among them, a regimental commander. In less than 90 minutes, the spearhead of Russia's 42nd Armored Regiment was crushed. Moscow fell silent. No press conference, no statement, no spin. But behind closed doors, Western intelligence sources confirmed that several high-ranking Russian officers were placed under immediate investigation. Whispers began to circulate. Colonel Viktor Semyonovich's capture had exposed deep flaws in Russia's southern offensive strategy and perhaps even revealed internal dissent among its battlefield leaders. Ukraine, meanwhile, didn't gloat. At Mykolaiv Military Hospital, medics tended to both Ukrainian and Russian wounded. One photograph captured global attention: a Ukrainian corporal who had fought in the ambush offering water to a captured Russian teenager. Just 19 years old, the conscript said, shaking his face burned by a nearby blast. That image went viral because even with thermal optics, guided munitions, and AI-driven warfare, this was still a war between people, sons, fathers, neighbors, and while Ukraine had won a clear and tactical victory, the cost of war still lingered in every face, every casualty, every unspoken trauma. In Washington, retired U.S. General Marcus Holloway weighed in during a televised interview, this wasn't just a battlefield win. It was a masterclass in discipline, planning, and restraint. Ukraine didn't win because they had more weapons. They won because they had more wisdom. That wisdom came through patience. Ukraine could have flattened the battlefield with missile salvos, but they didn't. They waited. They allowed Russia to overextend, then struck with precision. They used terrain, they used timing, they used their deep knowledge of the land to inflict maximum damage with minimum risk. But this wasn't just a military lesson, it was a moral one. During early interrogation, Colonel Semyonovich reportedly admitted, "I never saw it coming. Your people fought like ghosts, not with rage, but with purpose. And it was that purpose defending home, not conquering others, that defined Ukraine's resistance, the same purpose that once drove American troops in Normandy, Bastogne, and Fallujah." Ukraine didn't just stop a Russian armored column. They reminded the world that true bravery isn't a reckless charge, it's the discipline to outthink your enemy, the patience to wait him out, and the strength to show mercy when vengeance seems easier. That evening, the battlefield grew quiet, but the echo of that fight will resound for decades in war colleges and history books. What unfolded on July 27, 2025, was far more than a successful ambush. It was a modern warfare milestone, a demonstration of resilience, a reaffirmation of moral clarity. Ukraine, outnumbered and outgunned, didn't fall back. They stood firm, waited for the right moment, and shattered Russia's confidence in under 85 minutes. Hundreds of Russian troops neutralized, one senior officer captured with critical battlefield intel, over $350 million in Russian military hardware destroyed, a key regiment broken and scattered. But perhaps the most powerful blow wasn't on the battlefield, it was psychological. Russia's aura of invincibility was gone, shattered. Yet even in victory, Ukraine chose restraint. They didn't target civilians, they treated enemy wounded. They showed compassion to terrified conscripts in the hell of war they held onto. Their humanity, because this war, as brutal and relentless as it is fought by human beings. Some misled, others simply trying to defend home. And on that day, Ukraine showed the world something it desperately needed to remember, that true strength isn't about firepower alone. It's about the wisdom to use it justly and the heart to see the enemy as human. As this battle fades into textbooks and newsreels, may its deeper lesson remain. In a world growing colder and more chaotic, Ukraine proved that discipline, dignity, and duty still matter. They didn't just win a battle. They defended a principle, and perhaps that was the most important victory of all.